Hi, I'm Jamie from Not So Wimpy Teacher, and it's time for my next video about how to teach writing. I've been doing a whole series, and so we're maybe 2/3 of the way done. If you haven't seen the other videos in the series, you might want to start there, because today we're going to be talking about how to edit student writing. I'm going to share what I do and what I don't. It's kind of one of those videos where I'm going to share what I do and you might not agree with me, and that's okay. We can agree to disagree and we can still be friends afterwards, but I'm going to share some things with you, and it's okay if we have different opinions because we have different teaching styles and different students. So let me start by telling you a little bit about what writing editing looked like in my classroom in the early years of me teaching. Okay, so students would bring me their writing the day before I was supposed to conference with them. I wasn't doing group conferencing yet. I was just meeting with people independently, and they would bring me their writing, and I would take it home at night and read it and edit all of it. I'd bring it back the next day full of all that red ink, and we'd have a conference where all we could focus on was all that red ink. So we were really just focusing on spelling, mechanics, grammar. I am just that type of person who can't see past handwriting and mechanics when I look at writing. It's so hard for me, and I would get so bogged down by it that if your spelling was bad, that's pretty much all I saw. And students would come to me with their writing, and I'd be like, whoa, guys, you need to take this back and edit it first. I can't even read it. I made spelling really important because in my head, it was the most important. I found that my students were not responding well to this type of editing. They were disappointed when I would edit their work like that, and I can't blame them. I think about it, and if I spent all this time working on a special story and someone kind of just ripped it apart, I'd be a little disappointed too, okay? So over time, I knew I needed to change things. First of all, it was taking too much of my own personal time, and it was driving me crazy, and I wasn't seeing the growth I needed to see in my students. So I made a lot of changes, and I stopped editing my students' work. I stopped. I am not going to edit the crap out of their work. Okay? I just don't. And you might not agree with this, or maybe it's like, whoa, what a great idea. But either way, I thought I would share with you 5 reasons I stopped editing my students' work, and then 5 ways you can help your students to learn to edit their own work. Okay? All right, here we go. I'm going to start with 5 reasons I stopped editing their work. Number 1, it is way too time consuming. Don't be taking papers home to edit it. Like, at home, you need to take time for you and your family and your hobbies and your animals and whatever else. You need that, because how are you going to come back the next day ready to give your students your all if you're never taking time for yourself? So you cannot be taking the writing home all the time. You cannot be doing that. It's time consuming in class. When you're spending your entire conference time just focused on mechanics, then you don't get to spend time during your conference time focusing on content. And if you watched my last video about conferences, you know that I focus on content for most of our conferences. Most. I might have a conference with them about editing towards the end, but probably just one. And that's okay, because guess what? Content's the most important thing. Okay? You could be a fantastic writer and still be a terrible speller. But being an amazing speller does not make you an amazing writer. Okay? So think about that as you're spending most of your time with students editing. Is that the best use of your time? Is it too consuming? For me, it had become too consuming, so I stopped. Second reason I stopped editing my students' writing is that it was discouraging my writers. You know, you would have this sweet little writer who got so excited about your personal narrative unit, and she writes the story about baking with her grandma, and then you take it and you circle and you underline and you cross out stuff, and when you hand it back to her, that's not what she was expecting. She was expecting you to comment about her content. She put her heart into that story. That story was important to her because you told her to write about something important to her, and then you crossed it all out and circled it and made it red. It's going to discourage her. In the next story, she's not going to be confident in telling her story, okay? You're going to decrease their desire to write. Who loves to write when you're scared about the feedback you're going to get at the end? So when I saw that my students were getting discouraged by my edits, I realized I had to stop. I need to be encouraging my writers so that they love to write, because the student who loves to write writes more often, and the student who writes and reads more often is going to be a better speller anyway. Okay. The third reason that I stopped editing my students' writing was that editing writing, circling every word that's spelled wrong or every place they forgot a capital or a punctuation, that doesn't actually teach them how to be better spellers. It doesn't actually teach grammar skills. They may be able to go back and fix some of those errors, probably not all of them on their own, but they may be able to go back and fix some of those errors, but there's a good chance they're going to make the same error again. There just is. I spend 10 minutes prior to writing workshop working on grammar and actually teaching them a grammar skill. And then as I teach more and more grammar skills throughout the year, they start to integrate more and more of it into their writing. It's just natural as they get better and more confident with the grammar skill and the writing content that they start using these skills more. I do expect them to use spelling patterns and grammar skills that we have learned. I do expect them to do that. And that's what I'll be grading them on when I look at mechanics, is what at their grade level they should be able to do based on what we've learned. That's what I'll be grading them on, not spelling as a whole. They had 8 errors, but if only 2 of them were words a third grader would ultimately know, then they only get graded on those 2, not the 8, okay? Does that make sense? It doesn't actually make them a better speller that you circled every word in their writing. If you have students who are really, really struggling with spelling, they're probably really struggling with phonics and word patterns. These are probably things that you need to spend time with them on in differentiated groups, reading groups. Maybe you have a great spelling program at your school. Mine didn't necessarily have a great spelling program, and I was required to use it, so it wasn't a huge aid to my students, but maybe you do have one that really helps them to understand the different letter patterns and things. But just circling a bunch of stuff in their writing and making it red and discouraging them doesn't make a better speller, okay? Fourth reason I stopped editing their work, I started to really look at the rubric that I used to grade. The rubrics are in my writing units, and I really had to have a heart-to-heart with myself. Spelling is the tiniest portion. Spelling is one minute line on the rubric. They could get a 0 in spelling and still get an A in their writing, which tells me that spelling is not the most important part of their writing. I would be doing them a disservice if I spent so much time focused on spelling that we didn't work on the rest of the skills that truly make up that rubric, that truly make up great writing. Things like leads, dialogues, transitions, word choice, conclusions. These are the things that I need to be focusing on, because if they are missing out many of those, their writing scores are going to decrease rapidly. It does not mean that I'm going to completely ignore spelling. It is still on the rubric, but it's got to stop being my top priority. It's got to stop being what we think writing is spelling, okay? Focus on the big puzzle, not the tiny little piece. Spelling is one piece of like a 100-piece puzzle, okay? All right, the last reason that I really stopped using or editing all my students' writing is that I truly believe their writing should be representative of their current ability as a writer. And maybe that means there's a lot of errors in it, but that's who they are as a writer right now. And they're on this huge path to become a better writer that doesn't just start and end in 3rd grade. It goes on and on. They're going to become better writers all through grade school, all through high school. So this is just where they're at right now. It's just a sneak peek at where they're at right now. And it might include lots of errors. But that's who they are as a writer. Developmentally, that's where they are right now. If I go through and I correct every wrong word and we send home this piece of writing that's perfect, it sends the wrong message to families. That's not who they are as a writer, actually. That's who they are as a writer after I have circled all of their errors. That's not really fair. Okay? We want to be able to show parents, like, here's where you started at the beginning of the year. You can see that it was short, it was very simplistic, it had a lot of errors. Here's where you are at the end of the year. There's still some errors, but as you'll see, they were attempting much more challenging words. It's longer, it's more developed, and the errors aren't as simple as they were at the beginning of the year. They're trying bigger words. Maybe they still misspell, but now they're trying a multi-syllabic word and maybe having some spelling errors versus that short sight word they're misspelling at the beginning of the year. It allows us to see their growth as a writer. Don't forget who your students are. For my case, my 3rd graders, they're just 8-year-olds. Their writing should look like 8-year-old wrote it, not like I wrote it. And the temptation is there to fix every error because we're teachers. That's what we want to do so badly. But if we don't fix every error and we let their writing shine through as what they're capable of doing right now, then we'll be able to see their growth and we'll be able to see where they're at and where we need to help them. If you're seeing a whole bunch of errors in words they should know how to spell, it makes you wonder if they're just memorizing words for a Friday test and maybe they truly aren't understanding these word patterns. Okay? That is why I stopped editing their student writing. Too time consuming. It was discouraging my writers. It wasn't really teaching spelling. It's only a small piece of the puzzle, the mechanics. And I think their writing needs to be a representative of who they are right now as a writer. That way we know where to help them, where they started, whether they're growing. Okay. That being said, we do want to help them grow. We don't want to just say, make all the mistakes you want. I don't care at all. Of course we want them to pay close attention to the words that they can spell and making sure that they fix those, making sure that they've added the punctuation that they should know to add by a certain point in their schooling or the capital letters. Obviously, we want them to do this, but I want them to take ownership of doing it. Which means they're going to miss stuff. It means that they're going to turn in a paper without a capital letter, even though they said they looked. But by training them now to take ownership and look for these things, you're setting them up to be better writers forevermore. Okay? You're teaching them how to edit their own work instead of needing somebody else to edit it for them all the time. Okay? So let me just give you 5 quick ways that I like to help my students to learn how to edit their own writing. That way, I'm not the one who edits for them. They are learning the steps necessary to make their writing look better. All right, first of all, I think it's important to give your students resources and help them to know where these resources are and how they can be used, modeling it in front of them. Some resources you might have a word wall. I didn't have a word wall, and it might depend on your grade level. If you do have one, you need to make sure you're showing them how to use it and referencing it often. The word wall probably has sight words on it, and those are words that you expect them to spell correctly in their writing. When you are writing in front of them, model looking at the word wall to find the word. When you're editing in front of them, model that you're looking for those words. Another thing I found really valuable was having a word bank for certain students. It's hard to have a word bank for the whole class during writing workshops because we're all writing about different topics, but when I had my lower kiddos as an intervention, I would give them a little bit of a writing bank. As soon as I discovered they were writing a story about a dinosaur, for example, I'm going to help them by giving them a little bank of words that they might use, like the word dinosaur or herbivore or extinct. These are words that would be pretty challenging for my intervention group, but might come in handy in their story. So having a little word bank, especially for your intervention kiddos, is helpful. If you're working on some kind of writing project, which I told you I don't do in writing workshop, but there are time and place for those. I would occasionally have to do them in science or social studies or reading, where the whole class is pretty much writing on the same subject. Then put a word bank right up on your whiteboard of words that might they might use. I mean, for example, at the end of the year, my students used to write about their favorite activities from the year. And so we would just create a bank and start writing things like the word favorite, because right there, that's a hard word in 3rd grade. So just a bank that the whole class could reference when they were editing was helpful. This might not be something you do regularly. All my students, when we teach the editing lesson, it is in my lesson plans to teach the editing lesson, they receive this checklist. And it's just a list of things they need to go through and look at the writing for. And I train my students to reread their writing for each item. So the first one is, I read my entire piece to make sure that words are not missing. So they have to read their whole piece and see if words are missing. And then they can make a check mark. And you can laminate this for them so they can check with Expo marker. The next one says, I checked the spelling in my piece. When I'm not sure how to spell a word, I have used my resources, okay? Whatever those resources are that you've provided. Also, if they're really not sure about how to spell a word, you might teach them to circle it or do a squiggly line underneath, just to tell you that they understand that this word does not look right, but they also don't know how to spell it or how to find it. That's interesting because I think it's the first step. When a writer can recognize that a word doesn't look right, but they're still not sure how to spell it, I think that's the first step. That's a great step towards being able to spell it. They recognize that it's spelled wrong. I made sure that every sentence is capitalized. So again, this checklist is so handy for them. They go through it and make sure to check these things. Again, will every student do this perfectly? Will some students say they read through it and did it all and they didn't? Absolutely. I'm going to train them. And also, throughout the whole process, I'm really working on helping them love writing and get excited about their story. Once they really take that ownership, they want it to be edited. So, some of my students who really don't do well with this editing checklist because they don't know what it all means. So this might be a good conference where everyone has their editing checklist out and I'm guiding them through the process of using it. That might be what my conference groups need that week. Another resource that I think is helpful are like personal dictionaries. I don't use like regular dictionaries. I don't tell my kids when they say, how do you spell such and such? Honestly, I don't accept the question, how do you spell? I'm busy with conferences. That's not something you get to do during writing workshop and say, how do you spell this? How do you spell that? That's just too time consuming. But I do like having a little spelling dictionary for them of like commonly misspelled words for their grade level. It always gets spelled wrong. It drives me crazy, but it does. Replied gets spelled wrong. Said gets spelled wrong. So they're on here so students can look and find these words. And there's a little extra room so you can write extra words, especially if you notice that a student is repetitively spelling a word wrong. You could add it to the side. But I loved giving them some resources. Another resource that you should teach them to use is if they're writing informational text, they should have books and articles from their research. Make sure that they know to go back to those to look for spelling. I've seen kids write an entire research paper, about Martha Washington and spell Washington wrong the entire time. We want to make sure we're reminding them that their source is not just for facts, but they can also use it as a reference to spelling when they get to editing. Okay? By the way, here in a minute, I'm going to give you a link. I'm going to give these to you for free. They are in my writing units in the student printable section, but I'm going to give you these 2 resources for free, and you'll find the link in the description for this video. But I just wanted you to know you're going to get those. Another thing I have found to be really powerful when teaching students how to edit their own work is make sure you're teaching them the different editing symbols. They may or may not use them yet, depending on your grade level, but show them and model every time you're editing something in front of them using those symbols, because they're symbols they're going to see throughout their schooling. Teach them the 3 lines for capitalization and circling a word that's spelled wrong, putting the period inside the circle to indicate that it was missing punctuation. Teaching them the proper editing symbols sometimes makes some of your writers feel really important and they like to use them. Others won't use them, and that's okay. I don't care if they use them, honestly. If they're editing their work and they come up with their own key, it's fine with me as long as they understand it. Okay? Also, another tip, use peer editing. Include time built into your schedule for peer editing for each masterpiece. I include a day that students get to peer edit for each of their masterpieces after they've edited it themselves. The first thing I like to do for peer editing is I teach them to sit right in front of each other. It's their shoulder partner. the person who sits right next to them, it's the closest person to them. I train my students at the beginning of the year. Whenever I say share with a partner, that it's quick. It's the person right next to them. That's something I would add to your back to school procedures to teach, is what to do when the teacher asks to share with a partner. Real quick, who is it? Who is it? I teach them to sit right in front of each other. Partner A reads their text aloud, just like I do in conferences. And this is the best way to not focus too much on mechanics, is have the students read the writing to you. If you're like crazy like me and can't see past the spelling, it's going to help you so much. You'll hear content. You'll be like, oh my gosh, my writers actually can write, because you're not seeing all the craziness on their paper. But I have partner A read their story aloud to partner B. This usually catches the whole like forgot a word in a sentence or repeated a word in a sentence, which are very common errors when we're writing. So that helps. Okay, then partner B will read theirs to partner A. They still have time, which they should. Then partner A will take partner B's paper and vice versa. They trade papers, and they'll actually go through and try to make editing marks on their paper. They will catch some errors usually, but it will still be grade appropriate. A third grader is only going to catch a third grade error, maybe. Okay? So it's really different than me going through and correcting absolutely everything. Having a peer find a few words is more grade appropriate. Okay? And honestly, reading somebody else's writing in your class can actually improve your writing too. It gives you some ideas. It shows you someone else's style. So it's good for everybody. I know it can be chaotic. I am a teacher who struggles with there being a lot of noise and chaos in the classroom, and I always have to just remind myself that there is going to be a little bit of chaos during peer editing, but we're going to model at the beginning of the year what it looks like, what it will not look like, so that it will continue to improve all year. Okay, next tip. Have students type their final drafts. If spelling is really important to you, then have them type it. If you can. I used to take my class down the computer lab for some of their masterpieces, not everyone, but typing up a piece of writing is part of our standards, so it might be part of yours, but either way, spell check helps them. It's not going to be perfect. They're still going to turn it in with errors because they don't know which word to pick when spell check recommends one, or they're so far off spell check doesn't recommend something. But it gets them so much closer. And it's really learning how to type is super important. And wait until when you print the piece out and like writers are holding this in front of them, it looks published and real, and they get excited. Anytime you can get your writers excited about their writing, you're doing a good job. There's lots of different ways to publish writing. Typing is not the only one, but use it sometimes. It's fun. If you can get past the crazy computer lab chaos. Another way, if you're really wanting to help them with spelling and their writing, use it in a conference, but only focus on one paragraph. They're sitting next to you and you say, all right, I'm going to think aloud while I edit your first paragraph. I want you to watch what I'm doing and what I'm writing and what I'm thinking, okay? And then go through and say, oh, I see one of our sight words, and I see that it's missing a vowel. So I'm going to go ahead and circle that so I make sure and fix it. Don't feel like you have to circle things that are not grade level words. Even in that first paragraph that you're just editing. And then when you get through the first paragraph, say, did you see how I edited that first paragraph? Did you have questions about that? Great. I want you to work on editing the rest of it. Do it just like I did with the first paragraph. Are they going to find every error? Nope. But I wouldn't expect them to. Great. It's okay. We wouldn't expect kindergartners to write a 5-paragraph essay, and we shouldn't expect 8-year-olds to write a perfect publishable writing piece either. Okay? Again, use those conferences by having students read their writing to you. I talked about that in my last video. Doing that might help you to get past this obsession with mechanics and help you to focus on their content. You may actually find some really superb writers in your classroom that you didn't notice before because of their handwriting and their spelling. But when they start reading their content, you realize, wow, they're so creative. So give it a try if you can. Again, I did go ahead and include these free writing resources for you if you don't want my writing units. If you do have my writing units, they're in the student printables section. But if not, I have included this link in the video description so you can click on it and grab that freebie. Alright guys, the next video in my series is all about grading writing. It kind of goes along with today, but I hope I can save you a little bit of time with grading and give you some new ideas of how to get the grades that we still need for our grade book. Okay? I will see you next time. Bye.